delighted to spend a bit of time today with Alistair Logan, who is a leads value advisory in EMEA for Ceridian. And I'm going to let Alistair talk about what he does in that remit, but effectively, Alistair provides a lot of really useful advice and guidance to clients during the sales process to kind of help them identify that kind of tangible return on investment and what that might look like, and also really trying to line it with the problems that potentially that customer is experiencing with whatever solution that they have in place.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you today as well. So value advisory is a function which is offered by a few providers in the market. I think it is a bit different the way that we approach it. So my background, I guess I should add, was in implementation for Accenture, so around SAP systems, Oracle systems, all of those ERP suite. I was then in-house as a change manager, and then I was advising, not too dissimilar to yourself, from a vendor selection process at a EY level in terms of people advisory. So that's kind of where I came from. So when we were setting up value advisory, in particular, actually, when we were setting up for EMEA, we've always been very keen on identifying quantifiable value with what we do with our systems. I.e., we don't just want it to be right, you've digitized something that was on paper, right? That's not what we're focused on. So what we do from a value advisory perspective is work out, as you say, that kind of end goal and what you're driving towards, but in a business enabler and quantifiable way. So that's both pre-implementation, but then one of the things that, as I say, this is why I think we approach it slightly differently, is it's not just about building a business case, it's actually about building achievable goals for you to deliver as an organization. Whereas otherwise your goal is get through an implementation, which, having been in that old ERP world, that was often that was the thing you're striving to achieve, right? It's just to get out of hypercare kind of thing, right? So I think that's what we try and do, is make sure that we've kind of got those goals set out so that you can track through them. And actually, as a result, one of the things that we end up finding there is that it's not only a case of helping you build a business case, identify some of those measurable business KPIs that you can track, but it also then starts to help you form your change management and adoption strategies, because it helps to define actually what this is going to enable you as a business to do, and it gets there for your operational managers focused on those throughout the implementation. So you're not just going, well, I want it to do what it did before, I want it to do what it could do in the future. So hopefully it helps you really take a step forward rather than a kind of lateral or only small step forward in that systems implementation journey.
Excellent. No, I understand that, and I think when I sort of involved in the demos that you're in, and we're talking to clients, and you're in a demo environment anyway, so there is a solution focus. But what I like about what you tend to bring is those kind of customer stories, and we won't go into them now, and we may even talk about it a little bit later, but you're actually bringing real life scenarios where you go, yes, there was X, Y, and Z, and they had this problem that you had, and this is how they solved it. Might not be exactly how they are going to solve it, but at least it gives them that kind of aligned thinking, and it gives proof as well, which I think is really important, because clients always like to hear what other clients have done, right? I mean, that's the whole point of case studies, so it kind of makes sense. The next question, I think, is something that we've experienced sometimes, and I've certainly experienced during my time in software, which is, we're often here at Silver Cloud, as I said, always aligning clients during the selection process to really steer them to this end solution mindset. What are as you said, the end goals, the success criteria. And it is a bit of a cliche, but it is all about focusing on the problems that need to be solved across that whole business. And bearing in mind, an HR and payroll solution has to keep a lot of people happy, right? There's lots of stakeholders, and that's great. And we kind of get into that mindset. I think the problem sometimes that we get, and I've experienced previously, is that at the demo stage, when the vendors are in that demo mode, sometimes clients fall back a little bit into that kind of features and functionality assessment, you know, is it red, is it blue, can you do this, you know, without, you know, as many button presses and all that kind of stuff. Very important stuff, but then it can fall into a kind of that dreaded beauty parade of systems and functionality. Do you agree that can be, you can see that as a problem, and how do you, I guess, in your role, try and sort of refocus clients back to that value element?
So yes, I definitely think it's a problem, and I suppose, I sit in an advisory function that also sits alongside my colleagues who do all the demos. So as you say, there is definitely a time and a place, and a huge value in understanding that. And I think one of the reasons why I joined Ceridian, to be very honest, was that the user experience is that bit better. So having been in that change management and implementation world, I know how, when you go to put a system in and go, oh, right, everyone's going to need 2 weeks of solid training on this system, right? So there is definitely a point there of just going, actually seeing in those demos, just going, oh, actually, that's actually a pretty friendly user experience. Maybe we don't need to be investing this huge amount of time in that training piece, and it's more about just explaining the process and driving adoption rather than actually kind of classroom training and some of those things that can be very onerous and very difficult to actually really get a benefit from. But I think the point there of HCM systems, payroll's normally the first, if not the second, largest variable controllable cost in a business. And I've kind of mentioned it before of saying, actually, you could just digitize some paper processes, or you can take them over from an old system that maybe was doing some of those processes, but you're then having to do a manual step. And as I say, you can automate a bit more, put some AI in there, put some intelligence steps in there. But actually, when you start to think of it in that world of going, actually, what's that? What could that system enable? It's a system that's giving you ability to really make data-driven, insight-based decisions about your largest variable cost or your second largest variable cost. So I think that's certainly one of the points that I try to level. As you say, with that, you often have a lot of stakeholders involved, right? So often you've, of course, got a key stakeholder within HR, but there's also then those operational managers, there's a leadership level, there's, of course, the payroll functions, etc. So as you say, there's an awful lot of people to focus in on there. But I think that's what we try to do. And I suppose to come back to your actual question around how do we kind of influence that, one of the things I try to make sure is that by the time we're demoing, we've made sure that we've had the intelligent conversation about, actually, when you get into the what does this button do questions, that we've actually made sure we've come up with the right answer in the first place, and there is that vision, there is that case for change, whatever you want to call it, in mind of going, actually, this is the right way to go. So I spend quite a lot of time kind of going, actually, you know what, we can do what you've asked us to do, but we don't think that that's actually going to deliver what you could really achieve here. So I think that's often where we get to of going, and as I say, I think some of my colleagues would be going, well, okay, yeah, well, we'll just do what you've asked us to do. But I suppose I come from that advisory world where I'm very happy to challenge and be a little bit more difficult and go, well, wait a minute, actually, if you took a step back first, then maybe that's how you can actually make sure that you're ticking and achieving those broader business objectives than just, as you say, I'm also looking over your shoulder and realizing that there is something that just says digitizing HR and Silver Cloud, but and payroll, that is a relief. But it's definitely that point that it's that HR and payroll are for the whole business. It's very easy to say, well, actually, they're functional enablers for HR and payroll. Actually, if we think of it as going, this is the system that everyone will be going into. There are very few other systems in any organization where everybody goes into it, right? Even the ERPs, it's mainly finance, supply chain, those kinds of functions, right? So there's definitely something there of going, this is the system that is actually incredibly high touch from all of the business. And I think that's always the thing I try and bring it back to, going, actually, we've got the right stakeholders involved, and have we therefore got all of those perspectives considered, rather than, as you say, we get in there and we go, right, here's how we can improve your payroll. And that's when I think you can then get a bit stuck on, oh, well, I'm used to having a button that did this, and will I still have a button that does that?
Yeah, and I've seen that the way that works in a demo, and I think it works really well, because a demo is a very difficult situation, especially at the moment when we are still remote, and it makes it just that little bit harder. And so you've got the pre-sales consultant who does a really good job of just making sure that the agenda is being followed and that they're demonstrating the solution in the right way. And then you've got the salesperson who's sort of trying to make sure everyone in the room is happy and getting their questions answered. And I think it's really good to have someone like yourself that takes that step back. And I've seen you do it in demos where you say, look, actually, why we've demonstrated that way is because it allows you to do less of this, or it allows you to do this quicker, or if you can cut the efficiencies by X, we know that there can be some cost savings. So it's almost giving the context behind it, and again, maybe using some real life stories that then sort of, it doesn't just become a functionality 5 minutes. It's actually, the client can recognize where that value is in real terms. And I think you have to do that, because when you're in a demo, people are very much demo orientated, and there's no getting around that. And I think it just realigns it back to, okay, what are you trying to achieve? I think that's really interesting.
Very much depends who we're focusing on across the organization, right? So if you're in a function that has a very painful system that's very time consuming to use, then of course those softer bits of going, I just want this to take 5 minutes rather than 5 hours. So you know what I mean? The value there is certainly there. I guess when you're then talking to maybe a CFO, there's definitely an element of going, yeah, well, unless we're going to fundamentally reorganize the business, we've still got somebody in that job doing that, and whether it takes them 5 hours or 5 minutes, they're the ones that want to focus on the actually how much we're spending on the system itself. I guess we have an advantage at a Ceridian and Dayforce level on this, in that as a SaaS platform that goes across quite a few areas of functionality, we're able to often prove some pretty good hard benefits from the total cost of ownership perspective. So, and again, we've gone to some lengths too to make everything that we do a little bit simpler. So there's less of that kind of hidden cost going on. We didn't realize that actually maintenance is going to be like this, or support, and actually it costs quite a lot to change an integration because we've decided we need a new field in it, those kinds of things. Whereas actually, again, we've gone down very much a configurable route there. So I think we do try and influence those hard drivers as much as we can. I also think we have an advantage from a payroll perspective, that the continuous calculation piece there really does allow us to achieve a much better payroll accuracy rate. So we do certainly hit some of those hard benefits as well. I think one of the other things to mention there is we also, as well as doing some of that pre-implementation, post-implementation, what we do is we have a database of course, we have a database of our customers using the system, but we've kind of taken that and anonymized that to give ourselves our own, what we call a data backbone at the moment, and we're kind of building it increasingly into the product, so it actually be increasingly customer facing over time. But that allows you to then benchmark and baseline yourself against some of these metrics. So whether it's payroll accuracy, whether it's the number of HR roles, the number of FTEs you have, some of those things where you can actually compare yourself to others and know how you're doing on that. So I think there's that quantifiable value that we start to see that you can track through. And as I say, you can kind of, there's an element of, and I definitely used to be in a world where we'd sometimes get systems live and then you go, right, now we've got now's the uphill challenge, because we might put it live. We've not actually told anyone it's live yet. So let's just do it all. We did an awful lot of soft launches. So it's one of those kinds of things that finding that data set and actually being able to know whether or not what you've done there is achieving that value is huge. I think as an example, and you were talking about, I'm not going to give you an exhaustive list just now, but I think we'll talk about payroll accuracy. I think the other thing is around the engagement impacts, and we've certainly seen some of that actually giving people some of these tools, making life easier for them, can have some really material impacts just on employee turnover. And I think people often underestimate just how much it costs them. Employee turnover is not just the cost to hire someone else, it's that productivity impact of someone working their notice. And actually, before they've worked their notice, they've started looking for another job. So again, there's a productivity impact that's likely a few months. And likewise, then when someone's coming in, that upskilling, we go, right, okay, well, they've gone through X course and Y course and now they're operational. But actually, by the time they're really up to, again, there's an impact on that side too. So I think the cost of turnover is huge there. So making some very small gains from an engagement perspective and making people's lives easier and empowering people can have some huge impacts from actually from a business perspective overall. It's not just about having happy, smiling employees, which I think we all know that is a good thing in itself, but actually it's something which you can still defend at a higher level of going, actually that is materially has a bottom line impact. I think one of the other things that we often see is around scheduling efficiency. Try that one again. Scheduling efficiency. Certainly around actually improving some of that. So not only improving visibility there, but as an example, we're working with a manufacturer that saved 1% off payroll. I think I told that to my marketing colleagues, and they go, we like figures more like 99%. But actually, 1% off your total payroll, you know what I mean? That's a substantial figure to just gain just by putting a system in, right? I mean, that in itself justified their investment within the first year, right? So there's definitely times that just by putting some of these bits of functionality in, but again, that is going, right, we're going from here, and this is what we want to drive, and we want to improve that visibility. So I think it is starting with the right end in mind, setting some of those KPIs to go, look, these are the things we're going to try and hit, because what gets named gets measured, and what gets measured gets done. So I think it's that kind of principle, getting those things lined up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. I like that last bit. And I think, you've touched on lots of things that we experience. I think you first of all know your audience, absolutely, because we hear stories, personal stories where the finance director might say, well, I'm liable for X, Y, and Z because that's the position I hold, or we don't want to go through the furlough nightmare that we did, if there's another pandemic and we want something to automate that. So there's a lot of transactional elements. And then you get, someone from the HRD who says, I've got most of my team working weekends just to try and do X, Y, and Z. And I can't do that because they need their downtime. And also, then you've got other stakeholders saying, well, I just want it to be a better employee experience or a better applicant experience. And I want the solution to help us get our brand out there. And so I think it's really interesting that, yes, all these stakeholders have all these professional but personal goals in mind. And I think the other thing that you mentioned as well there, which I think is so important, and you can fall into this trap, is being over enthusiastic with return on investment. And I think, like you say, with the example with the 1%, you've got to keep these things absolutely realistic and probably under egg them, because that's easier to view, it's easier to accept. And if you can prove that you can get return on investment just by incremental improvements, which can get bigger, but let's start really small and let's see the impact, and that can be achieved and measured, and then move on to the next thing. And I think that's really interesting. And I think where these kind of exercises fall down is probably, unlike your marketing, where you go into double figures and you get someone going, that's not realistic in the real world. So I think that's really interesting. Well, look, we've run out of time, Alistair. I really want to thank you for the time that you spent. Now, this is a huge topic. We could spend loads of time talking about it in a bit more detail. I think we've only really just scratched the surface.